Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn.
And me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. All right, Robyn, you want to kick it off this week with how your last week was?
Yeah, there's not really. I don't think my update this week is much different than my update last week. I haven't done anything art-wise at all. Work continues to kind of be the focus, and that continues to be where most of my energy is sort of being put. So by the end of the day, I'm just kind of a potato on the couch watching. So I don't know if you ever watched Road to Avonlea. Did you ever watch that show?
No, I never did.
Okay, it's like a spin-off of Anne of Green Gables. And
okay.
I've been looking for it for the past few months, and I haven't been able to find it. And my friend at work has it. Like, she has it on Gazebo TV. And she gave me her login credentials. And so I've been watching that all week, and it's been wonderful because it brings me back to being a kid, which is what I need right now.
Nice.
So
yeah.
So nothing super productive, but I've just been trying to take care of myself as best I can. And and then of course with Christmas coming up, there's some prep that I've got to do for that. And that's basically it. How about you?
I'm kind of in the same boat. First of all, it's great to hear that you're taking care of yourself. I think it is so important. And you and I talk about this all the time, just how important it is to honor when you're needing that self-care. Yeah. And I think tapping into something that makes you feel like a kid again, I think is a really great thing. I mean, nostalgia is a big thing for a reason. I think it takes us back to that time when things didn't feel so complicated, when the most we had to think about was like a spelling test on Monday,
Right.
So I'm glad to hear you're thinking those terms. Definitely inspires me to try to be better about that myself, because this past week I've just noticed my energy levels are just plummeting.
Well, you had new students too, right? Like that you were taking on? Yeah.
So I had another busy week of teaching, and so I get to the end of the week and I'm exhausted, but it's definitely in a good way. I just always feel so fortunate to be doing the work I'm doing. But what that does do is it makes me a little bit susceptible to feeling like I can't justify being tired. Because I'm like, but I'm doing what I love. I should have just endless amounts of energy, but it's just not how it works. I'm still a human being, and my body and my brain, they need rest. And I think it is helpful for me to stop and acknowledge just how much I do in a week. So, which is still, I suppose, a little bit problematic in that I'm still looking for reasons to justify resting and not just honoring being a human being who needs rest. It's like, well, I earned it. But there's also a level of satisfaction that comes from doing work that I really enjoy and feeling like I'm making progress. So it's a balance I'm really still trying to strike. And it's tricky. But this week I did give myself some grace. So on Friday, it wasn't really a day off because I still had stuff I had to do, but I let myself sleep in, and I sort of just moved at a bit more of a natural pace for that day. So I had a nice little rest, and it meant that I was able to get some work done yesterday that I probably wouldn't have been, and just because I would have been way too tired. So I'm trying to, think in terms of, well, yeah, you could just plow through and, just get all this done, but how are you going to really feel about it? And how proud are you going to be of the work you're creating when you're so tired? So right. I sort of, sacrificed. I don't really like to think in terms of sacrificing, but I traded Friday full of productivity for a Friday with more rest, which meant I was able to take Saturday, which is usually a day where I just kind of collapse. And I was able to get some stuff done. So I'm just sort of, I can see the finish line. I can see that we're at the end of the year. I can feel we're at the end of the year. And so I'm trying to just get things wrapped up so I can be fully prepared for the new year. So I can be fully rested. And yeah, so it's a little bit tricky, but I am getting better about giving myself that space.
Yeah. It's interesting, like you saying that it's, try to find that balance, and I, like you give me kudos for taking that care of myself. But it's funny because I'm also still trying to find a balance, because for me, I actually lean, yes, I guess by definition, what I was doing was taking care of myself and giving myself rest, but I do that so quickly. So, I think for me, I actually have a bit of work to do in terms of like, I think I could really dig down and find the energy to move some of my art stuff forward, but I'm sort of bailing on that a bit, and I'm giving myself I sometimes I feel like it's
right,
like it's a cop out.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm trying to find the balance too, and just like I'm on the other spectrum of it though, like it's instead of like always pushing myself to be super productive, I'm actually not pushing myself enough. I'm leaning too much into the just like resting. And I've been learning too that like the type of quote unquote rest that I've been doing, like binging TV shows, isn't actually always the best thing for my brain. Like sometimes it's actually better for me to get some stuff done. Like that would make me feel, it's not what I want in the moment, but that's what would actually make me feel better. So it's interesting because I am sort of learning, trying to figure myself out and figure out what do I actually need versus what do I want in this moment. And that's been an ongoing journey for the past like few months. It's been, it's been good. But I think in this case though, I do think that like I haven't had much to give beyond, like I don't have much left to give after my workday ends. And I think that's legit in this case.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We talk about this a lot, just how draining it is to really have to give away your best hours to a job, and how you really have to look at the whole, like the bigger picture of your life, because there's definitely a time when I was working a day job, nowhere near as demanding as the one you're working. I just made sandwiches all day. So it was, it was pretty easy.
But you're dealing with hungry people. That can be very demanding.
It can be. I was working a day shift, so the customers were actually pretty nice. It's the night shifts you have to watch out for.
Yes.
But, and I remember getting to work and starting work at whatever, 9 a.m. and feeling like so excited to get back home and just work on music. And I was exhausted by the time I actually got home. And yeah, and I think, I did the best I could at the time with what I was working with. And compared to what I'm able to do now when I have my days to myself, it's so crazy. But it is about just remembering that you're always just trying to do the best you can with what you're working with in the moment, and knowing that this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And I know for you, you're working towards something else. There's more that you want, and there's more that you want out of your art, and, building a career out of it and all of that. So, I think too, it's definitely important to acknowledge when you can push yourself more. And I've certainly been in that place too, where I haven't been pushing myself as much as I could have. And it has been really helpful to sort of like take a stand with myself and say, okay, you have to get this done. But also to just acknowledge that, well, from where you are right now, you really are doing the best you can. And, just take whatever steps forward are accessible to you.
Right.
And maybe that is just taking a task or two off of your to-do list, or establishing a new habit that is, something tractable, but, non-trivial. So something that you feel like makes a meaningful difference, but that will fit with your routine as it currently stands. I think that's where I certainly went wrong for a lot of years, where I kept trying to plan this perfect schedule and this perfect routine. And it was always around this like fantasy life that I was not living.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, well, I want to do all of these things and this is how I'm going to schedule it. But, the reality was I just wasn't living that life. And, it's really helpful to just sort of stand in where you are right now, and yeah, reach for the things that are better, because the things you do today are going to determine your future, but to not let yourself get bogged down with feeling like you're not doing enough. But yeah, again, as you said, it is a balance to acknowledge, well, maybe I'm not doing enough. So, and I guess ultimately you don't really know until you try, until you say, well, what is something I can do that feels like I can actually get it done, that would be still substantial, and then you just have to try it. And yeah, I think experimentation goes a long way. That's certainly been my experience. I've really had to experiment a lot over the years with the things I do, just to get to this point. And it's an ongoing thing. I'm still very much, trying to find my way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, it's also acknowledging, because I've done the same thing where I make these plans, and it's like you kind of realize, like, and then the plans fall. Obviously, I don't follow through with the plan, and then I feel like terrible about myself.
Yeah.
But yes, that recognition that, like, yeah, that's because the plans I'm building are not only based on a life that I'm not living, but also based on a person that I'm not. Like, I'm not. I think we so often, when we're putting pen to paper to kind of come up with a plan of action, we're basing that on, like, this ideal version that we have of ourselves, or this ideal life that we're living that doesn't actually really exist. And so they're not actually achievable milestones necessarily. And so this is the other kind of journey I'm on right now, is kind of trying to figure out, like, and I'm a pretty self-reflective person, but I actually, like, in this area, I feel like I don't know myself very well. And so I've been spending a lot more time trying to, like, think this stuff through, and trying to actually, like, get to know myself better, get to actually know what I want, and untangle, what I think I should want from what I actually want, which is a whole other journey that I'm just kind of beginning. And I feel like I'm rambling right now, but
no, not at
anyway,
all.
It's a tricky thing. And this is kind of like, it's timely that we're talking about this now, because of course both of us, I think, are going to be going into annual planning for next year.
Yeah.
I suspect, knowing you, your annual planning is going to be much more thorough than what than what mine is. My annual plan is to just, like, not crumble.
I mean, if that's where you're starting from, I think that's fine. I've had years where that is absolutely the case. I'm just like, just don't fall to pieces. Actually, no, I always start out the year with grand aspirations.
Of course.
And then at some point, it's like, just don't fall apart. I had a little bit of that this year.
Right.
So yeah, and well, planning is something that's been really tricky for me. And I know we'll be talking about that in an upcoming episode in a little bit more detail. But I certainly have struggled with planning for the year and getting, too far ahead of myself. So that is something, it is going to be quite elaborate, but in a way that is going to make what I'm reaching for much more tangible, much more accessible.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
So I think we're gonna touch more on the annual planning and reviewing the year, etc., in the upcoming episodes. But I think today we're going to talk a bit about, like, defining success and what that looks like. And this is a topic that's top of mind for me pretty consistently, because I find that I'm actually having to redefine success quite a lot, and I use that as a mechanism for overcoming feelings of self-doubt or feelings of failure. When I'm sort of feeling those things, I actually take a step back, like, okay, well, did I fail? Like, is that what happened here? Or did I just define success in too narrow of terms, potentially, right? So I think it's a great, going into the new year, I think it's a great topic to kind of touch on. I'm curious to get sort of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, I think so much of that ties into what you were saying about knowing yourself, and how few of us really know ourselves when it comes to success, because we've been fed this very narrow definition of what being successful means. Generally, it means, what do I have? Rather than, who am I? What do I want? How can I contribute to the world? So I tend to think about success more on those terms for myself, but my definition has definitely evolved over the years. My at least, relative to music, early on, my initial definition of success was just to make a living as a musician. And I've been doing that for, quite some time, to varying degrees of success. But,
Right.
I've been just a musician for 9 years now. So yeah, that was the starting point. But once it happened, and I think this is something too, is that we sort of define success also in how it's going to feel. I think we have a very clear idea of what reaching a certain point is going to feel like. And I think we think everything is going to just fall into place.
Yes.
So we hit this point, and then all of a sudden we have more than 24 hours in the day, and we're happy all the time. We have endless energy, and everything is just sunshine and rainbows. And then when it happens, you go, I don't feel any of that.
Yeah, you're still having
feel more of what you are.
Right. I'm like, oh, I still have to deal with the mess that I am. How is this fair? I did all those things.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think for a long time I focused on music at the expense of other things in my life, and I think on some level part of that came from feeling like music was going to save me. Like if I am as great as possible as a musician, if I succeed as much as I can, that's going to fix everything else. Everything else is just going to click into place. And that is just not the case.
That's so interesting that you say that, because that's where I am now. So I feel like if I can build this thing, if I can make this thing happen for myself, that will be the thing that solves my problems. Right. So it's really, and I think the rational part of my brain knows that that's not the case. But it's really interesting. So you've been through that, and I'm going to be going through that right now.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. It's the rational part of you. Like if somebody had said to me like, music's not going to save you, I'd been like, of course. But on some level, I was like, no, it's definitely going to save me. It's going to fix all my problems.
Right.
And that's not to say that music hasn't on some level saved me from myself. I don't know where I'd be right now without it. Having this really positive thing to focus on and obsess over and to drive me to be better, I think has been wonderful. And I am so appreciative of having it in my life. But there needs to be more. There needs to be more balance. And again, it comes down to just recognizing that I am a full human being. There's, more to me than just music. And if I'm going to succeed in music, there has to be more. I can't let it be the thing that keeps me going.
Right.
I need to make sure I'm taking care of the other parts of my life. And since I started doing that, over the last couple of years, I started taking some of those other parts of my life seriously. My experience with music has gotten way better. And that's actually been really helping me to better define success in music. Because for me, I never was really interested in being, a rich and famous rock star or pop star. For me, I wanted to just build a life in music that felt meaningful to me. And I'm realizing that part of that includes stuff beyond music. It includes the things I do to stay active. It includes all of my reading and my writing and my thinking. It includes my relationships. It includes my other hobbies and things like that. Like that makes for a much more robust and interesting existence. And then music is just like this extra thing that, it takes up the bulk of my time and the bulk of my focus, but it's not everything. And if music's not going well in one arena or another, I have other things to help bolster me. So I never have to feel like my happiness, my satisfaction, my sense of self-worth is reliant exclusively on music. I have all these other things. I'm like, well, if maybe I'm struggling with writing a song, or my playing's not where I want it to be, or things in my business aren't going well, I can turn to something else and be like, well, look at the progress I've made here. Right. And look, I had this really meaningful conversation with Robyn today. Like that was really special. Like I have all these other things, and it just helps to support the inevitable ebbs and flows
Yeah.
of being a creative person, and especially being a creative person who's trying to build a career around that creative endeavor.
Yeah. And I mean, you touched on something that's really, really important, and like the self-worth, and making sure that you have a life where you're getting that sense of self-worth from many different areas, because like you say, there's ebbs and flows, right? Like if you're relying on your music career to give you that sense of self-worth, then obviously when you take a dip, when you like maybe you lose students, or
Mm-hmm.
you get sick and you can't be as productive as you usually are, when that dips, then your self-worth goes with it. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because that's actually something that I'm experiencing right now. I've learned that I get a lot of self-worth from my work, from my day job. And so
Oh,
it's been a challenge recently, because that's kind of like the amount that I'm able to accomplish within my job has diminished, and just because of where I'm at emotionally, and as a result, my sense of self-worth has diminished, right? Because
mm,
that was one of the primary sources for me to feel that sense of self-worth. um Interestingly, I don't get a lot of that from my art right now. And I think maybe just because it's such a small thing, like I haven't it's not a
right.
big it's not the main part of my life. Like the majority of my time is spent working at my day job. But I have had that realization where it's like it's actually critically important for me to build those other avenues up, so that I am, feeling like a whole person, and that my sense of personhood isn't just reliant on this one thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting.
I'm curious to know what parts of your job really help you to feel like they offer you this sense of self-worth.
I think it's well, there's a couple of things that I struggle with, and it's intense feelings of not being good enough and not
Mm-hmm.
working hard enough. And I
Mm,
also feel this, like I always have this fear that I'm being lazy, and
mm-hmm.
none of it's accurate. Like I know that this is I don't know why I have those kinds of feelings, but I think in the workplace it's my opportunity to counter it. Like I work really hard, and
Mm-hmm.
I support the rest of my team, and I work beyond my job description. And I know I'm, because I'm in the nonprofit as well, like I know I'm giving back to the community in some way. And so all of those
Mm-hmm.
things make me, um, it helps make me feel like, I'm not lazy.
Mm-hmm.
I am good enough. Like here I am doing this thing, and I give back, and it's feeding all of those, it's countering all those really deep rooted insecurities. But on the flip side, when you're someone who's predisposed to feeling like you're not good enough, not working hard enough, you just keep working harder and harder and harder, and you get to the situation I'm in right now, um, where I'm burnt out. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's oh, that's really interesting. And what it made me think of is that it sounds like your job gives you the opportunity to tap into some of the things you value. So service
Yeah,
is you and I have talked about this a lot, how, part of why we launched this podcast is to potentially be of service in some way, shape, or form to other artists. So that's
100%.
a mutual value that you and I share. But it sounds like too, like there is a part of you that really values, hard work, and maybe that's why it's causing you so much distress to feel like you're being lazy, is that it actually runs counter to something you really value, is that maybe not just working hard for the sake of working hard, of course, but to work towards something that feels like you're contributing in some way, or you're doing
Right.
something that makes things better for other people. And so what I'd be interested in knowing is where else in your life can you apply those sort of attributes?
Right.
Can
Right.
you channel that into the stuff you're doing with your art so that so you're not finding that sort of sense of self-worth from a job that is quite, toxic for you?
Yeah. That's really interesting, and that's something I've been reflecting on as well. And that's a realization I've had with my work, because one of the things I always struggle with my art is selling it. Like is pitching it, right? So like when I'm at these shows and people ask about my work, I have a lot that I could say. Like there's a lot of my own kind of history in the paintings that I've been creating recently, and there's a story of personal growth there that I could dig into, but I never do. And because I feel this kind of discomfort about talking about myself in that way, as it relates specifically to my art, like there's a discomfort of like selling my art in that way. I don't know, but I kind of realized I think the reason why I haven't pushed things forward on that sort of things the way I kind of envisioned I would be is because I feel fundamentally that my art doesn't do enough to help people. And I know that artists say, and it's true, like art enhances your space, and like enhancing your space is a big deal. That like coming home to a space that you feel that like either sparks memories or makes you feel comfortable or cozy or whatever. Like art plays a role in creating your home atmosphere that's quite important. But I don't really, that need isn't strong enough for me. Like I want to serve a bigger need. And there's a disconnect there. So like my art isn't doing that in isolation. Like I need to build in other things within this whatever business I'm kind of starting that serves a bigger need. And I haven't quite figured out what that is yet. But I do think it is critically important that wherever I'm investing, like whether that's a paid day job or whether it's my art, wherever I'm investing my time and energy, it's important to me that it is serving a need that is outside of myself and that is greater than me, right? So that's been a really interesting realization and helpful too, and because like in terms of jobs, I've always struggled to find a job that really lights me up. And that's one of the things I love about where I'm working right now is that like I really can get behind the purpose and the mission.
Right.
And so that's amazing. It's the first time really that I've had that. But so now it's like, oh, I finally recognized that that's kind of been the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of my employment and in terms of my art right now. Yeah,
that's really interesting, and it makes me a little sad that you think your art isn't something that could, I mean, you obviously acknowledge just the value of art in general, but that you feel like your art in particular isn't doing enough to offer something to people. Well, I'd be curious to, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I know it offers something. Like, I don't say that to be like self-deprecating in any way. I think it's just that for me personally, I need the mission to be different,
Right.
I need to be putting my energy towards something that does more. And not to say I'm going to stop selling my art, because I'm not. And I know there's things there that people really, because I know the feeling of finding a piece of work and I'm like, oh, I just love like the rawness of this, or I love the artist, like I love the energy they put into this, or it makes me feel happy. Like I know how amazing that is. And I know that there are people who will get that from my work, but it's not enough of a driving force for me.
That I resonate with 100%. Yeah. I think I feel that same way about my music, where I want to share it, but I suppose I don't feel like that's where I can offer the most value. So yeah, that's definitely something I understand. And I think that's sort of where I started from when I, had my moment of realizing, okay, music's my calling. It's what I'm going to do. I, again, was never specifically like, I'm going to be a rock star, or I'm going to, get signed to a label and, just make music. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all. For some people, that is what lights them up the most. But sure. I think I felt a resonance with like music, like the essence of it. And I think such a huge part of that for me was wanting to share it with other people, and not just my own music, because it kind of took me a while to get into songwriting. I was quite late to the party there. So really early on, my contribution to the world of music was through teaching. And I think that's a big part of it for me, is that because music has given me so much, I feel like I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to give it back in some way. And teaching just was one of the first avenues I explored to get there. And I was very fortunate that it just ended up being something I really love. And, I keep doing that. But, I think for me, that's just been such a driving force, is like, where else can I offer service in music to make things better for other musicians, whether that's through teaching them directly or sharing thoughts and ideas. And, I've come in and out of blogging over the years. From the time I was maybe in my early 20s, I would every once in a while like get into writing about music. I think I just naturally feel this instinct to want to share it. And so part of my success for me, or part of what I define as success, is being able to get ideas out there to musicians that will help make their lives a little bit better in some way, to make their experience with music maybe a little bit richer or a little bit more personal for them. Because, there's so many ideas about how one should be interacting with music, or what, again, the idea that success looks this one way, that, if you're going to be successful as a musician, it looks like this,
Right.
And it's a very narrow scope that very few people reach. When, for a lot of people, their interaction with music or whatever art, they happen to gravitate towards, they just want to have a meaningful experience with it and a meaningful connection, and have it be a significant part of their lives without having to like go on the road for 8 months out of the year, which is something I was never really keen on the idea of having to go touring for
sure.
Most of the year. I would actually really like to live a relatively normal life. Like I do definitely want to go touring at some point, but I would very much like it to be on my own terms.
Yeah.
But I know myself well enough to know I love a routine. I like being at home. I like being able to just create and do things on my own terms. So, as I've been unraveling some of the what I felt were like expectations about what it looked like to be a musician, I'm finding my own way through the world of music that taps into the things that I really, really value, about this art.
And that takes a lot of courage to do that, right? Because I think my idea of a working musician is someone who is like gigging at bars and like maybe going on tours, depending on the stage they're at. So to admit that like you're like, I want to build a musical life, but I like to be at home and I like to stick with my routines. It does run counter to, I think, what the mainstream, or at least my, like when I think musician, what I kind of picture in my head. And it takes courage to just kind of admit that, like, yeah, that's, I know what that kind of mainstream image is, but that's not for me for, reasons A, B, C, and D. And I'm just going to continue forging forward how I feel is right for me. And I come up with like against that a lot too, in like the art world, seeing how other artists work and then thinking like, oh, that's how I need to do things. Like that's how their path is the path that I need to follow to be successful. And I've done a lot of thinking too about like what does a successful art life look like for me, which I'm still haven't figured out. And I think also like success isn't really a destination so much in my mind. Like I don't think
100%.
I think, and I don't think it's stagnant. Like it changes.
Right.
As you evolve as a human, of course your idea of what is success is going to change as well. And yeah, so I like, for me, like coming up with like a definition for success isn't the thing that's most important. I think the most important thing is being honest with where you want to go and coming up with a plan to get there, but then also being open to being sidelined or forgetting there and realizing, actually, this isn't for me. I don't like this. Like, I thought I did. And that's totally okay. It's totally okay for you to think that you want this thing, to get that thing, and to realize, no, sorry, don't want this, and to change course. So yeah, sometimes I think like our definitions of success can actually really put us in a box if we're not careful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that might have been part of what delayed my progress with my music career, is that I think I did hold on to some level. I held on to this idea of what it was going to look like and the avenue through which I had to get there. And so I spent so many years really trying to just work and improve. And part of that was just, I've talked about how I just didn't feel good enough. And so I was trying to like get to a point where I felt good enough to like be out there where people could see me, because I was so afraid I'd be, found a fraud. Be like, you don't really do music. And I'm like, no, it's my life, I swear. So there's definitely a lot of insecurity, but I think part of it was also just kind of delaying what I felt like was the inevitable. Like, I got to go like gigging every night and I got to go do touring and stuff. I'm like, look, I love playing live and I definitely want to make that more a part of my life again. But I realizing now that it's really important for me to do it in a way that works for the life I actually want to build. And once I started embracing that, rather than pushing away this life or delaying this life that I thought I was going to have to live, when I kind of started embracing what I really wanted, it opened up all these other opportunities for me. I could see all these other avenues through which I could reach people and, succeed in music by my standards.
Yes.
And, hence this podcast. I don't think I ever thought I would start a podcast, 5, 6, 7 years ago, as I was sitting in my studio, drilling exercises on the guitar, just trying to get good enough. But this is something I'm finding like deeply satisfying. And as I do my blog post every week, that's a really important part of my musical life. And it's writing, and all the reading I get to do, and, and again, the teaching, and that I'm doing things like writing music. And definitely part of my career is going to be putting my music out there once I get to the point where I have the resources to do that. That is absolutely going to be a part of my experience, but it's just going to be one thing, while I have all these other things going on. And yes, live music, touring at some point. And, I have so many ideas for ways I can bring my ideas to the world. And I mean, part of that is also just a product of the digital world we live in now. Who knew YouTube would get as big as it did? That was just not something I saw as an option when I was 20 years old. But, from probably about 2016, finding Adam Neely's channel and being like, oh, wait, you could just like talk about music. Like, that's a thing you can just do. Just like make a video and just talk about music. And from that point, I thought, oh, it's something I'm probably going to do at some point. And that's something I'm launching in 2024 is my YouTube channel, where I'm going to talk about music and probably do some performing as well. But, so I just, it's really freed me to just embrace all these other opportunities to craft a career and a life that I'm, finding incredibly satisfying. And it was all just from, finally accepting who I am and what I want. And yes, definitely, I agree with you. I think success is something that is constantly going to be in flux. But I feel like I definitely have more of a general sense of what it is I'm looking for that feels quite sturdy. And as long as I'm constantly in conversation with myself and taking the time to reflect and acknowledge what it is I'm wanting, then I think I'll be able to make any necessary adjustments to continue, maintaining a satisfying experience with music, so that, at any one time I'll be able to stop, look at my life and say, yes, I'm doing the things that I want to be doing. And if at any point I'm not, I can evaluate and I can make shifts.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's really kind of magical when you realize and embrace the fact that, well, it's essentially embracing your own agency. Mm-hmm. There's like an idea of how to do things and how to accomplish a goal. But so like, if we're looking at like, I want to live a musical life, like I want to be able to sustain myself off of my musical activities. And, there's sort of like, we all have kind of a preconceived idea of what that would look like. But once you kind of recognize, like, actually, I'm a creative person and I can find other ways that work better for me to still achieve that goal. And I think that's such an awesome thing. And I don't know, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship generally, right? Is like, you can kind of make up your own rules in a way that I don't think you can really do in just traditional employment. And I could be wrong. But I mean, I guess if you're looking at life on a broader scale, like your life goal. Like there's so many different paths you can take. And if you just let yourself just trust in your own imagination and creativity and your own skills, people will, I think you can find a way. Like there's no hard and fast rules. There's no set way you have to do things. You don't have to bend over backwards or torture yourself doing things that are really just don't jive with your personality. You don't have to. You can find other ways.
Yeah. I love the idea of acknowledging that being a creative person is something that can be used to your advantage in other areas of life.
Yeah.
Because there is very much, this notion that, well, if you're a creative person, like you're going to be completely incompetent when it comes to everything else. Which I there's something to be said for that if that's how you approach life. Like, I mean, again, I did for a lot of years where I was like, music and nothing else matters. And, I got quite bad about, a lot of just things that I should not have been letting slide. But, as I have started thinking in terms of using my creativity to my advantage, like I'm definitely noticing a shift in other areas, in how I structure my teaching and, all of that stuff. And definitely in building, my career and my business and thinking in terms of, creative problem solving and
adapting.
For sure.
Creativity plays a big role in adapting.
Mm-hmm.
And adapting is pretty critical because like you're a person, like you're a solopreneur, I think is one of the, I don't know, I think that's what people call it.
Yeah.
So of course you're going to have to adapt your business to your changing needs as a human.
Yeah.
And that takes some creativity, creative problem solving. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think ultimately success is going to need just more nuance for it to be something that actually can work for people.
I'd actually kind of wonder if, I'll think this is something to think on more for me, but I'm wondering if I should actually banish the word success because I think for me, and I feel like other people will resonate with this, like success said, like that word has been tied to you've arrived, like you've gotten there, everything's good now. Like we kind of talked about this earlier in the conversation. That's not the case. And so I think this whole idea of success is ultimately a big letdown for people because you might succeed, but you're still, like maybe you're still physically unwell or mentally unwell, or like you're still dealing with the same, you've accomplished this goal. So it's success and that means everything's better, but you're not actually better. You're still you. So I'm wondering if that word is actually has too much expectation tied up with it for it to be a good thing to aim for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. Because there is definitely that sense of, success is an endpoint. And as you rightly said earlier, like it's really just, it's a journey. It's like an ongoing thing. And so I wonder then if it would be more helpful for some people to think less about reaching any particular endpoint, instead thinking about the process, like the daily process. So the idea of like focusing on the process and not the prize, because if you hate the process of, trying to achieve whatever level of success you're trying to achieve or whatever specific goal, if you hate the process it takes to get there, that's a pretty sad existence.
Oh, for sure.
And definitely, and it's exactly like you said, then that's when you end up with somebody who gets to where they wanted to go, and then they look around them and then nothing else is improved. If you're not, if part of your process isn't also taking good care of yourself and taking care of your relationships and taking care of everything else in your life, all of, like that stuff isn't going to magically get dragged along with you as you like reach the finish line. It's going to be left in the dust. So I think if you can build a day-to-day satisfying process to just move through life, and then certainly having things that you're aiming for, it gives clarity and focus. And I think that's really helpful, because if you're taking action that is just haphazard and is just like taking action for the sake of action, I think that can be an issue as well, because then somebody will end up somewhere and they just won't even realize how they got there. So I think having at least direction is helpful. And maybe that would be an okay replacement word, to be like defining your direction.
Right.
Because you can always change your course to get there. If you sort of have an idea of where you're going, that puts you in the right direction, but you get to define how you approach getting there. And then you also have, if you're taking the time to stop and reflect, you also then have the control to adjust course as you need, as your needs change and as circumstances change.
Right. Yeah. So you're, conceptualizing the idea of success, not as an end point, but like you were saying, like as it's a journey. Yeah, I like that. Because like the question you'll often hear is like, how do you define success? Which is a really quite a hard question to answer, because like, what do you like, in what way? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like success, how, But I like the idea of like, yeah, like what does your ideal, like, what sort of direction are you aiming for, or something like, I don't know if that's, anyways, that's something to think more about. And it's kind of all, it's all semantics really. Like it's, but it just like, for me anyways, success comes with this idea of like achievement.
Right.
And achievement ties into this feeling like if I achieve the things, everything will feel great. And that's just, that sort of trajectory isn't accurate. So it's like, I need to think of a different way of conceptualizing this for myself. I think to just feel more comfortable with the fact that life is it's not going to be easy, right? Like it's not going to be something that is like you get to a point and it's all worked out. Like, there's always going to be struggles and challenges and frustrations, and there's always going to be the negative emotions, and there's always going to be the self-doubt and the confidence issues, and all of those things are always going to exist for me, because that's just how life is. Like there is no arrival really, right?
Yeah, and so I think then if maybe people are thinking less in terms of whatever endpoint they're reaching, and more in terms of how can I acquire the tools and the skills I need to just navigate life, then regardless of what's happening in any moment, there can be some level of, whether that's peace or it's satisfaction or it's like a sense of, being at least on your own path and having some level of control, because there's an infinite number of things we don't have control over, but taking control of the things that are within your power and then doing your best to navigate that as you go. Maybe that's, a way to think about it, that is building the kind of scaffolding you need to just be able to navigate being a human. And yeah, and I think it's important definitely to acknowledge that life the way it is now is very much going to be what it's like going forward. Like definitely people who are quote unquote successful still deal with a lot of the same things we do.
Right.
So, I think being somebody who has the tools to navigate that, then, if you do sort of achieve and I guess a societally acceptable level of success, you'll be just a happier person, because you've established these systems and processes and routines, and you have ways to reflect and to just live a way that feels genuine to you. Yeah, so definitely something to keep thinking about.
Yeah. So my goal for the new year is to just not define success.
I think that's great. Or to like undefine it.
Undefine it.
Rip it to shreds.
Yeah.
And stop focusing so much on the end goal.
Yeah.
Things take the time they take.
Yeah, that's a big one for me, and which becomes very challenging when you're, when we're so connected to each other and we're seeing other people hit the milestones and achieve the things that you want to achieve, and it becomes tricky to just focus on yourself and just keep one foot in front of the other, keep moving forward as best you can. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this, can't remember the word for it, but there's this Stoic idea about, finding satisfaction or happiness within your own path. So not letting the paths of other people, influence you or misguide you, but sort of knowing that you are on your own path and then finding happiness there.
Right.
Because that is ultimately what it comes down to. And, also remembering always that what you're seeing from other people is always their highlight reel.
Right.
I feel like that's something that I think at this point most people are aware of, but it's so easy to forget. It's, you spend any time on Instagram and you see people within your domain, doing all the things that you want to do, and you're like, like that could be me. but so yeah, it can be sort of a reminder of, your lack of success if that's how you choose to look at that. But if you can, as much as possible, just remember that, your path is yours, and that everybody else is, they are on their own path, and it's not always going to look the way you think it does, and that, we all have challenges, and we all also have, our own unique gifts that we can take advantage of and leverage when we're trying to make our own lives. I think that for me anyways has been really comforting, to just really embrace my journey, to go, yeah, I think so-and-so's journey is great, and it's great to see. And I find too, actually, as I've been clicking more and more with what it is I want to do and what I want to say, and as I've been finding my voice as a musician, as a thinker and a writer and a speaker and an educator and an artist, I feel a lot more satisfaction in seeing other people, again, succeed, by whatever standards you're
right.
Gauging success. But to see somebody do something, let's say, that I eventually want to do, so putting out somebody putting out an album or something, I feel a lot more genuine happiness at seeing other people do that, because I know where I'm going. And maybe that too is part of having direction, even though I'm not there yet, so to speak, like where I know I'm headed. I know where I'm headed, and I know who I am, and I know what I want to do. And I think that has brought me a lot of peace that I just didn't have before, when there was a lot more vagueness about where I was headed.
It's really interesting. And I love that visualization of the path. And I'm thinking, like, you right now, it's like you're walking on your path in your shoes with comfort and ease, because you've acknowledged that, like, no, like this is the path for me. This is what I'm on. I'm good with this. And like your path is going to come with all sorts of different things, right? That that are true to you. Whereas previously you were probably like, you one foot on your path barefoot and the other foot on someone else's path in their shoe. And it's just this awkward, like, you can't move forward with ease, and you're uncomfortable. And so of course, like, you see other people moving through life and doing the things, and it makes you feel like it's no surprise that you would feel this kind of envy or whatever you were feeling, it's like, yeah, because you weren't on your path and like just owning your own path at that point, right? Like you were trying to fit onto someone else's. But I'm trying to make this analogy, but it's like I have it in my head, but it's not
from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a cleaner way of saying that, I'm sure. But anyways.
No, I get what you're saying 100%. And that is absolutely what I've experienced, where, and I mean, this goes back to, like going to music school and studying classical guitar. I didn't do that so much because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. It was coming, I think, from a very genuine place of, my intention was to be as well-rounded and educated a guitarist as I possibly could be. And I thought studying classical music would be the way to do that. And like, I don't regret it at all. I'm very appreciative of the stuff I learned, but it definitely, at some point I realized, and maybe this was after I'd written my first proper song, I realized, oh, this is not for me. It still took me a while to, before I left completely, but, there's definitely a history of me trying to live other people's dreams. I had somebody tell me
yes.
at one point, like, you have to stop trying to be what other people want you to be.
Right.
You have to figure out what it is you want and stop trying to live other people's dreams for them.
Right.
And like right up until the point, I was teaching at music school in Kingston, and there was definitely a point where I was not being completely true to myself and what I wanted, and the tension was excruciating. But of course I shoved it down and I distracted myself, with like ridiculous practice hours and all of that, and either I was grinding or I was burnt out, and in either of those sort of headspaces I couldn't really stop to acknowledge how little I was doing that was actually what I wanted to do.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely felt that tension of, in some ways, walking my own path, because my path was always going to be with music. That was very clear. But I tried all these different avenues that just did not fit properly. And, there's something to be said for having those experiences and for it clarifying for me what I didn't want, because now I know what I want, and it feels right too. I've had the experience of feeling what it's like to do the wrong thing for me, and it made it so much more clear when I was doing the right thing, when the pieces fell into place and I go, oh, this is what I want to do. It just made it so much easier to let that other stuff go. And maybe that is a big part of undefining success, is learning how to be okay letting go of the things that you thought you wanted, whether it was coming from the influence of others or it was just, our own expectations about what we should be doing. I think learning to be able to let that stuff go and be okay with it. Like, I don't have to learn every single thing on the guitar. I'm just not going to be that kind of guitar player. I know who I am now. I know what my guitar playing serves. So I'm less interested in trying to do the jazz thing and the country thing and the blah, 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 like doing everything because I felt like I had to do everything. And then, career wise too, I have a better idea of, or teaching wise specifically, I have a much better idea of the kind of student I want to take on. I know where my strengths are, and I know where my value can be directed. So yeah, it's just been helpful, but it took me a while to get here, and I feel like that's okay. Like I'm so glad for the time that I had to really have those experiences, because it has set me up for now being in a place where I feel so much more confident. Like, I know who I'm not so clearly that I can stand in who I am, and right. I can just move forward and not be distracted by the other stuff around me.
Yeah.
And again, I'm so glad I can feel like so much joy for other people in following their own path, because I can see the value in everybody bringing their own unique perspectives and experiences to the world.
Yeah.
That's one of the great things about when an artist can take control of their art and their career and their lives, is that now you have somebody who really has something of value to offer, because nobody's going to have the same life experience as
right.
any of us. And so there are insights that we can offer, and there are people that we can reach that nobody else can reach. But we have to be able to step into who we are and then be able to put that out there in order for those people to be able to find us. So that's very much where I'm coming from now, is I want to really fully just step into that and put that out into the world, because I know with so much clarity what I want, who I am, and where I want to go.
Isn't it interesting that for you, like determining who you are, a large part of that process involved determining who you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really fascinating to me, because I think that might be kind of the stage I'm at right now, is I haven't quite figured out who I am as an artist. And right. I'm just still slowly piecing together who I'm not. And that takes time, because it means you have to try things.
Took me years.
Right. You have to try things, and obviously you have to fail at those things that you try.
Yeah.
and anyway, so it's a really interesting idea. And maybe that's something I haven't come up with goals for the new year yet, but maybe that could be one of them. It's, like unlearning success, but also figuring out who I'm not. Because I think when we try to figure out, like, who am I? That's the question we ask, right? Who am I? But I think it actually might be quicker to ask, like, who am I not? And then deduce from there. That might actually be an easier way to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think that naturally will give you more stability, because when you know who you're not, you can, with much more ease, say no to the things that do not align with who you are.
Yeah.
I think I for a lot of years was very quick and very willing to just give myself away. The real part of myself. I was so eager to adopt other people's expectations of who I was supposed to be, and it always felt uncomfortable. It never lasted. It was always, quite apparent to me quite quickly when something didn't feel like it fit, but I often stuck it out because I thought I had to, for one reason or another. And when now knowing who I am, if any of the things I tried don't work, as long as I'm doing things that align with who I am and align with my values and with what I can offer, I feel like then at least the things that don't work were things that I did on my own terms, and then I just try something else. That comes down to semantics, like how I approach putting stuff out there. I'm just really trying a bunch of things. I'm can't be positive what's going to stick, but as long as now I am working from a place that feels genuine and feels sincere, then I feel like I could just move forward and just easily say no to the things that I know just don't line up with that.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, you don't get distracted by all the other things that you could be doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really essential, or it's been really essential for me in trying to find more balance in my life, has been to learn what I need to let go of. And things that a few years ago I never would have thought I would drop from my experience, I have. A good and probably really common example for a lot of people is, something like streaming shows. I used to watch stuff constantly. That was like one of my default activities. One of my default leisure activities would be to like watch something on Netflix. I had like Netflix on my phone and I had Prime on my phone. And so I'd like just have stuff on the go all the time. And, just over the last couple of years, I've really weaned myself off of that. And I mean, to the point where now I pretty much don't watch anything. And this is not at all a judgment on the act of like watching anything via streaming. I just, for me, realized that it was something I could let go because I had this clear idea of who I wanted to be, and I had at least, a sense of what I had to do to get there. And, that was something that was easier for me to cut out.
Right.
But even in terms of my work that I do, learning to get comfortable with cutting down on my practice time. The bulk of my music time each day for a long time, for years and years, was practice time. And now I've got it whittled down quite a bit because I have so many other things I'm doing to support my music. I just can't devote the same amount of time. Something has to give. And it's become a lot easier to let go of those hours of practice and just get it down to like just what I need for what I'm trying to do, because I was able to better define who I am as an artist and what I'm trying to do. Because at one point it was about just trying to be, as good as possible. But now it feels much more like I'm trying to practice in support of something. So I'm able to streamline my process and really cut out, like trim the fat really. So like there was a lot of stuff in my schedule that I realized I was doing that I didn't really need. And as I adjusted to my expectation about the timeline for when things happen, even in terms of my development as a musician, I'm looking at a much longer time scale. I'm not thinking like, how much progress can I make today? How much can I learn today? How much can I push myself today? It's much more, let's see where I am a year from now. and then I can make adjustments, because ultimately I'm never going to stop wanting to be better, and I'm always going to be learning. That's just, it's one of my values is learning and being challenged. But it's much more directed now, and it's much more lean. And that's been really helpful to make room for the things like podcasting, like writing my blog, like doing scripts for YouTube videos and all of that.
Yeah. And it sounds like your approach before, like when you were practicing a lot and when you were pushing yourself to do more and do more, it sounds like a lot of that was coming from this kind of imposter syndrome place, right? Where you,
100%.
Yeah. And so when you can feel confident and when you kind of overcome that sense of being an imposter, I think all of a sudden it's easier for you to make those choices in terms of how you spend your time. And like, I'd imagine feel more freedom and like, yeah, I don't need to practice like 5 hours a day. I could practice for like 20 minutes and that's fine. Because you're not trying to prove yourself to anyone. You don't have that need anymore. So that's quite interesting as well. And that could be a topic for a later podcast, is the importance of like getting past that kind of imposter syndrome and like what that process might look like and how we even do that. That's something I'm still trying to figure out. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, because for me, I will say part of the reason why I have been able to step into some confidence with my musicianship is because I did so much practicing. So all of that practice time was definitely not wasted. I am glad I took the time to really work on my craft. And there's still, I still have a lot of room for improvement. Of course, I am certainly still very aware of my limitations, but I feel like the baseline of my skill level leaves me with enough confidence to do the thing that I'm doing.
Right.
So I'm at a point where I don't feel hindered by my current abilities to do the things that I'm doing right now.
Right.
So as I start to do more in the way of, performing live again, that's really going to force me to step up my game in some areas that have maybe fallen a little by the wayside. And then I'll deal with that when that's a thing. But right now, I'm not feeling like I'm trying to be all things to all people, music edition. I'm just trying to do the things that are going to move me forward with the things that I know are important for what I want to do.
Right.
And and it's definitely stepping into that confidence has been really helpful. And I think part of that too is just knowing that for the things that I'm still struggling with, I can figure it out. Like at this point, I have enough experience to know what I have to do to get better at something. And so I'm much less likely to sit in frustration of feeling like I'm not good enough. I feel more like, well, I have the tools and the skills and the know-how to get better. Or if I don't, I know how to find it. So yeah, that's a really complex topic. I think there's a lot to be said about it. So definitely, I think we should come back to that at some point. All right. Any final thoughts to wrap it up?
No, I think I guess the final thought I'd have is for those who are listening to our second podcast episode. Like the whole, defining success and for yourself and figuring that stuff. It's all, there's a lot of emotions that can bring up, right? And I think just being gentle on ourselves and showing ourselves forgiveness, and being patient with ourselves is really, really important. And so I would just kind of conclude by encouraging people to do that for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to our, as Robyn said, our second full episode of the Stream of Art podcast. We're so excited to be able to share our thoughts with you and are looking forward to doing much more in the new year. That being said, we are still going to do another episode. We have a couple more that are already planned. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.